Good afternoon to everybody. It is indeed a pleasure to have very eminent speakers on this very important day, Himalaya Diwas, celebration in 2021. In fact, Himalaya Diwas was started in 2014 by Uttarakhand government to protect Himalaya, to conserve Himalayan ecology, and ever since we are celebrating Himalaya Diwas. And this is, very much relevant to our school. Our school of environmental sciences, in collaboration with the ENVIS, funded by Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, and SUNRAISE Project, that is co-founded by the Business Program, and the Young Holistic Program, which is recently started in our school as a co-curricular activity, where the young student is having one lead in a particular activity, and he or she is given opportunity to say a few words, organize events, competitions. So we have a variety of speakers from different areas having expertise in Himalayan atmosphere, air pollution, geology, biology, ecology, and this is very wonderful, and I hope it is the complete type of panel where we have would address the issues related to agriculture and what are the steps forward and what is the message for our students. Ecology in Himalaya. We are thankful to the crowd. Then we have Dr. Chand Sain, Director of did several assignments and did a lot of research on carbon sequestration, dividing stress, soil and water conservation, ecosystem freedom, agroforestry, land use, color analysis, and then we did he has been developmental yoga, then we covered in interdisciplinary studies of mountain and futuristic study, and then he is having a fellowship and membership of different scientific bodies. He is fellow of National Agency for Ecology, fellow of Indian Botany Survey. Then I now invite Professor Rao to share and suggest what to proceed for Himalayan ecology conservation. Professor Rao, please.
Thank you very much, Professor Kulshrestha, for that introduction. Okay, today I have considered what should I be speaking about. So after considering all the things, I thought to put in the most important thing. So I will be talking about, if so, what the importance? The Himalayas, considered as third pole, is controlling a lot of climatic parameters. Dr. Dimri will be giving more details about it. But when we look at in terms of the how different the climatic regimes that are present in the various ranges of the Himalayan systems and how they are managing the resources. Then it became very important and interesting to us. There are questions that we have to ask these people and get the response so as we actually understand how the region has distinct problems but also an overarching commonality across all the regions. And thus came the first compilation of resources, that is, and also has influenced systems in the Himalayan region. And thus, the suggestions given in the material, all the research and the present together and suggestions for various development programs were summarized. If you look at in the recent, the Himalayan University Consortium that is managed by the SMOD with the World Bank fundings basically is trying to develop various collaborative programs with the South and the North consortiums where the developed countries are putting a lot of effort in terms of developing collaborative programs with the developing countries. So their emphasis is predominantly with the Nepal, Pakistan and Afghanistan area, but you can see education when Mr. Nissan was there has started the Indian Himalayan Central of raising the manpower that is required to take care of the solving various universities. So Mizoram University had some responsibilities, like Sikkim University had some responsibilities, Kashmir University has some responsibilities. With all these people working in a network mode, try to look at it. This is the very recent initiative, and probably by the next year we will find some of the results, what is coming out of this network mode of Indian Himalayan University Consortium. The major initiative of the current government is 8 national missions. One of the national mission is the National Mission on Sustaining Himalayan Ecosystems, where I had an opportunity to work as one of the members. The most crucial and primary objective of this mission is to develop a sustainable national capacity to continuously assess the health status of the Himalayan ecosystem. And this is one important thing I think most of us are interested, because the health of the Himalayan ecosystem is not only responsible for the livelihood sustenance of the people that are present in the Himalayan region, but also several billions that are present in the Indo-Gangetic plain, because Himalayas acting as the water towers of feeding the water requirement. Agriculture systems depends on the nutrient. The Himalayan agriculture was transforming and is transforming based on the market forces and also the socio-economic forces that are working in the region. The subsistence farming is slowly going away, and market-based food crop are getting dominant in most of the region, barring a few valleys which are still continuing to be traditional. The deterioration of natural resources is a major problem because agriculture is predominantly dependent on resources that are recycled from the forest systems. And deterioration of the forest system is a major hurdle for the sustenance of the farming systems in the region. The commercialization of agriculture is driving the people to more investments into the fertilizers and other things which are not common in the region, and the short-term growth and economic prosperity that has been witnessed by the people by modernizing some of the agricultural practices had bad impacts in the overall ecology of the region. And also total disintegration of agriculture in some of the region. The reasons are most of the people who are educated started moving into the urban centers, and the land has been subletted to those farmers who never cared to take care of the soil fertility levels. And this excessive harvesting of the soil fertility through the continuous cropping has deteriorated the quality of the soil and also increased the amount of the silt or the sediments that are being washed out from the Himalayan agricultural systems. Another major important factor is to increase the productivity levels. The agriculture departments have been advocating introduction of high yielding varieties. And this has led to drastic change in the agriculture systems and the extinction of the land races that were present. Perhaps this is very common across all the developing countries, and you could see from the data that the number of land races that existed in India has drastically reduced because of our quest for the increasing the per unit area yields. And this has led to extinction of several land races, perhaps that are suitable for the changing climatic reasons. And the loss of these varieties are going to be detrimental and also going to cost us to develop new varieties afresh because the research facilities require a lot of investment. There is a continuous research bias. It doesn't consider the mountain-specific requirements, and all the technologies that are developed elsewhere is just transferred into the mountain regions. The best examples are perhaps the protected cultivation systems that were introduced in the mountain systems. Perhaps Himachal was able to utilize some of them in valleys, but extreme steep terrace lands, the type of the polythene shelters that were recommended doesn't suit for the entire growing season. There is high degree of temperature variations within the polyhouses, and this has led to people to restrict to the type of cultivation that is suitable only to the polyhouses that were transferred as the technology transfer methods. There is a lot of unawareness about the dimensions of the threat, both at local level and also in the scientific community, and thus there is a mismatch in terms of the conducting research that is relevant for the region, at least in terms of the conserving the land races and trying to protect the soil fertility levels. When we ask for the why majority of the traditional mountain crops are neglected, the obvious answer is the total contribution of these crops is negligible in terms of the national productivity. And some of these crops are grown only in very remote, inaccessible Himalayan systems, and thus may not be really known to the people. And thus, people who are present in the Indo-Gangetic plains or elsewhere might never heard about such crops, and they are least bothered about such crops.
Sir, I have to intervene. I have
Yeah.
5 minutes, sir.
Okay. There is a lot of illusion about the coarse and fine grains, and people who are elite now consider consuming the coarse grains is going to be the most important thing for the living standards, and thus some of the coarse grains are neglected. The introduction of public distribution system is something which is most detrimental in the region, because the subsidized food grain availability in the mountain systems also has contributed in neglect of the local crops. And as the traditional crops were considered to be poor man's food in the region also, they were continued to be not paid much attention. There is a lot of diversity in the type of the vegetation cultivation systems in the region, and thus their ability to contribute. If you look at the diversity of the crops that are growing, measure in terms of the crosses, then you will see there is one major important type of the crop, that is the Baranasa, where 12 different crops grown together is important for the Uttarakhand region, and also you will see pulses mixed with the cereals and millets in the entire Western Himalayas, and more than 35 crops growing together in the Eastern Himalayas in the shifting agriculture systems. The most important factor in the mountain agrobiodiversity is there is a diversity of the crops that are responsible for nutrient cycling, insect pest management, plant disease and nematode management, especially in the Western Himalayas because of the acidity. The insect larval programs, which is locally called as Kurumula, is becoming a major problem. And the traditional systems are able to withstand such pressures, but the modern agriculture systems are not able to withstand this. Our research has shown that the traditional cropping systems has started disappearing because it was replaced by the high-yielding varieties or high economic value crops like the potato, kidney bean, soybean, and amaranth. And these replacement of traditional crops has led to increased soil erosion and other things, as I have mentioned earlier. There are several positive aspects of these traditional mountain crops which considered to be very good as far as human health is concerned, but as their productivity is less and their availability in the market is low now, that most of these crops are not consumed by the predominant population who are health conscious also now. The traditional crops act as the food security in the region, but also we have to see in terms of how they are grown. There are a lot of crops that are short-term growing season crops and also long-term season crops, and thus able to maintain the labor requirements in the region. And by converting all these lands into one agriculture crop season of yielding varieties, the labor shortage is one big thing that is felt in the most of the Himalayan regions. And there are a lot of traditional knowledge that is present along with the traditional agriculture systems, and these 3 slides are summarizing the things. And in terms of the economy, the middlemen are the ones which are getting a lot of profit out of the traditional crops that are existing in the region. And when we look at the bad effects of the converting the diverse agriculture systems into monocropping systems, there is a possibility of crop failures because of the genetic uniformity, which was earlier seen by the human society elsewhere. And this is something which the people has to consider before this. Before I conclude, I would like to say that as an ecologist, we always look in terms of the input-output ratios based on the economic output and the biological needs. When we look in terms of the economic output and the biological yields, the legume-based intercropping systems in the mountain systems are going to be very good both at the economic yield level and all even at the biological yield level. And thus trying to have the traditional agriculture systems continuing in the mountain region provides both in terms of the and also protection of agriculture systems in the region. And thus the approaches for agro-diversity conservation and management in the Central Himalayas requires the four-pronged approach, that is the management, use and conservation of natural resources, which is required for the mountain agriculture, development and dissemination of effective, appropriate, cost-effective eco-technologies which are developed in the region and regional focus, reorientation of agriculture policies, value addition of agriculture crops, wild edibles, medicinal plants, and equity, ethnic issues, economic incentives, and lastly, the conservation of socio-cultural setup, capacity building, participatory research, and empowerment of the women. I will stop here.
Thank you, Professor Rao. Wonderful talk and thoughts shared by you. And as you mentioned, better approach for agro biodiversity conservation in Himalaya. You also mentioned about the problem, issues in Himalaya, like need of transformation of agriculture, and also the issue of biasness and lack policy relevant to the Himalaya, and also lack of awareness. Thank you, sir. And now I request Professor Chand Sain. Before he starts, I briefly mention his biography. Dr. Chand Sain opened his MSc in Applied Geophysics from IIT, then ISM Tanwar, and PhD from NERI CSIR, Osmania University. He has visited Cambridge University, Rice University, a number of other foreign visits. He is fellow of several academies, and he is also honorary outstanding professor at ACSIR. He has been associated with a number of programs, but without wasting time, I request Dr. Chand Sain, because he has meeting at 4, so time need to be finished. Now the call is yours, Dr. Sain. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Professor Kulshrestha. Am I audible?
Yes, please.
So, very good afternoon to all the panelists, Professor Kulshrestha, Professor Rao, Professor Dimri, Professor Joshi, Professor Choudhary, and Mrs. Swati Singh, and all others listening to this webinar, to this Himalayan Day program. First of all, I wish all of you the Himalaya Diwas की हार्दिक शुभकामनाएं, and I thank JNU and particularly Professor Kulshrestha for invitation and giving an opportunity to speak on this important day. Word that is a very resourceful entity into our country as well as many other countries. It experiences a lot of hazards, it has lot of resources, but it is experiencing a lot of forces from different directions. So, just I will briefly explain as a geologist, as a seismologist, as a geophysicist. All of us know that Himalaya has been, the origin of the Himalaya has been due to collision of the Indian plate or the Eurasian plate, and subsequently is lot of subsurface processes, lot of surface processes are going on. And Himalaya is still rising, a lot of convergence is taking place within the Himalaya. So, it is also well known that Himalaya is the youngest mountain in our world, which has a very fragile ecosystem because of ongoing lot of tectonic and neotectonic activities. They are very complex in nature, associated with the convergence that is taking place between the India-Indonesia plate, rising of the Himalaya, erosion of the Himalaya, exhumation of the Himalaya, reworking of the rocks inside, and these are all manifested in the form of different surface and subsurface processes. And all these together have changed the landscape of the Himalaya, and which in turn dictate or control the damage pattern during an earthquake, during a landslide, or during an avalanche, a glacial lake outburst flood, landslide lake outburst flood, debris flow, or floods, etc. So this is one hand, we see a lot of processes are responsible for the Himalayan disaster. On the other hand, we have also observed there are a lot of anthropogenic factors that are being added to aerosol in one of the same metal dust, deforestation, consumption of the fossil fuels, burning of biomass, forest fires. These are all linked to the global warming or climate change, and that in turn making impact to the Himalaya. And these are causing extreme events. Recently we have noticed, because of these extreme events, extreme rainfall, Himachal has experienced landslides. This Uttarakhand state is also vulnerable for the landslides. It also gets landslides every year. So we have seen that there has been change in the precipitation pattern, either in the form of snowfall or in the form of rainfall. And there has been cascading effects. And that cascading effect we have observed into the Kedarnath disaster that was caused because of the lake outburst, we call glacial lake outburst flood, and it happened into the summer. There was some sort of snow and ice melt, rainfall, coupled with debris flow that created a massacre to more than 5,000 villages, inundated more than 5,000 villages, killed 6,000 people, and trapped Philippines. So we can understand that phenomena, but if we look into the recent phenomena, what has happened into the Rishiganga and Baliganga, that was caused due to the huge rock and ice mass avalanche in the winter. What caused it? This is the structure. This is the flaky materials basement over which that glaciers are existing. They have experienced through a period of time for freezing and thawing, and all of us have seen there have been elevation dependent temperature change into the Himalayan region. All of us know that temperature decreases as we go upward, but there has been little change into the temperature variations into the Himalaya than the plain region. There is an elevation dependent temperature variation in Himalaya. That means less than 500 degree, less than 500 kilometer, we see that 0.2 degree Celsius temperature warming to the 1 degree, but more than 500 meter above, we see 0.6 degree temperature warming per decade. And this has caused shift into the 0 degree isothermal change. So a lot of phenomena is taking place because of this climate change, because global warming, there are impacts caused by the anthropogenic factors. Besides that, Himalaya also experiences a lot of man-made activities. That man-made activities are unplanned mining of the resources, road construction, development of the hydroelectric power project, urban development, soil degradation. So all are also giving stresses to the Himalaya. So Himalaya is experiencing stresses from below, endogenic, from above, exogenic, as well as lot of other anthropogenic factors. So this is one aspect of the Himalaya. It has a lot of associated natural hazards, natural phenomena. On the other hand, that Himalaya at a high altitude has the naturally occurring storehouse of water, that is the glaciers, water tower of Asia, which are the lifeline to the billions of the people for irrigation, for drinking water, for hydroelectric power generation, even for transport. Some of the river system in the high catchment, the low catchment, people used to transport their log and etc. So this has given a lot of opportunity, a lot of facilities for our day-to-day life. Secondly, the sediment water transmits into the Himalayan system is so unique, it has made a central place for the habitation, for the agroeconomy. Thirdly, the unique pressure temperature regime of the Himalaya has, and the closure of the cases are a useful host for the occurrences of the precious minerals, for the formation of the precious ores, geothermal springs, hydrocarbon resources into this region. So we can see Himalaya has plethora of resources, different types of resources. I am not talking about other resources, I am talking about only the geo-resources. And again, one important thing, because of the tall standing of the Himalaya, it also controls the weather pattern, summer monsoon, etc. So we can see the resource point of view, the hazard point of view, Himalaya has a different type of entity. It has for the socio-economic development. These resources cannot be exploited in unscientific manner. This current sort of infrastructure cannot be done in an unplanned way. Therefore, we need to evolve a mechanism to balance between socio-economic development and the preservation of the Himalayan ecosystem or environment for its sustainability. So, it is the time that all the geoscientific fraternity, all that policymakers, all other people living into that, they should be sensitized that what would be our role if we want to live into this environment. All these phenomena what I talked about, they can't be stopped, they can't be prevented. But what we can do, the impact of such natural phenomena, the geohazard, the impact can be reduced. And for the reduction, scientific information is required, policy decision is required, response to the local and understand this problem. Then if there is an earthquake, if there is a landslide, if there is an avalanche, this cannot be stopped, but their impact to the society, impact to the structure, livestock can be reduced. In the geoscientific investigation, we can identify the most potential zone of earthquake. Wishing, and in the recent wishing that avalanche nucleated at 5,600 meters above sea level and then fell to a height of 3,600 meters. And when they rolled down over the hilly slope region, they smashed into pieces, and that debris then moraine, sediments, and was that ice converted into water, all made a admixture called slurry, and that slurry material in the high slope region came down because of the gravitational force. And when it happened, and when it made the damage to the Tapovan hydropower project, there was sufficient time, more than 25 minutes time, 20, 25, 30 minutes time were there. It is not like earthquake that takes place within seconds. It takes time for the flow, and it gives proper time to understand what exactly is happening and alert the people in the nearby region. But if you alert, we need to develop a standard operating procedure so that they should respond. So in the case of the avalanche, snow avalanche, ice avalanche, even landslides, it is possible to reduce the impact of the damage. In terms of earthquake, we will not be able to do that because of even if an earthquake takes place at 200 kilometers distance, it can make the damage within 20 seconds. Time is very short. But even from the geoscientific investigation, we can study and find out what are the most vulnerable zones, what are the zone of 4, 5, and based on other parameters also, we can find out this area can have some sort of earthquake after some time. Using GPS, we can understand how much strain is getting accumulated into the subsurface. When that strain will be released in the form of earthquake, we cannot predict, but at least zone can be identified. Then in that area, building code should be followed for the construction of the building or any structure. Even if old building is existing, they should be retrofitted. So like that, we can play a role to reduce natural phenomena. This is one sort of. So what is the solution? We have to monitor some of the parameters that can help us to understand about this system after some time, the prediction. So we need to monitor based on different parameters, that hydrological parameters, glaciological studies, meteorological studies, seismological studies, and all these studies. And if we make at one place and analyze and make some sort of multi-parametric investigation, we will be able to say something that unusual is going to happen into that region and alert the people, and then who are there into the nearby people, that disaster management, local authority, they have to execute it. And the local people have to be sensitized. What will be their role for do's and don'ts during that time? How they will respond. If they do not respond properly, whatever we do, it will not be effective. So a complete network is to be established between the scientific information. That scientific information can be gathered from a network of a system by which we will be generating data, we will process the data, produce the data, then that information will give some sort of indication and it will be passed on to the local authority and they will take some sort of action. This way, monitoring and early warning system can help to reduce the impact of the avalanche, snow avalanche, ice avalanche, etc.
Thank you very much.
So, I'll stop over here. I have some more time, few more time, just I'll finish it. This is one of the aspects. Other thing, that if we look into the Himalayan region, we have seen that particularly there is a much talk on the black carbon. This is also very important to understand that what is the role of the black carbon and why should we bother about that black carbon. That important message I am going to just give over here, that what is black carbon? Black carbon is nothing but light absorbing component of the particulate matter in the atmosphere, and which is formed by incomplete combustion of the fossil fuels, biofuels, biomass, wildfire. And this is the major component of soot which can absorb the radiation and warm it. And they are very short-lived, they are not long-lived. So that means, because of this black carbon, whatever phenomena we are going to face, that will be local and regional, it can't be a local. So we need to find out what are the sources of the black carbon. And even during the wind, during the summer, they can go at the high altitude. And if they cover ice and snow, then definitely you understand they will be absorbing more heat, warm, and ice and snow will be making. So to stop it, for the good health of the glacier, we need to understand the sources of the black carbon, and we need to find out how we can mitigate the shifts going up. That means that we have to control it. This is one aspect. Second aspect, black carbon can cause health attacks, asthma, cancerous related phenomena, lungs related phenomena. So all these things, if we can understand the sources of the black carbon and their mitigation we can take care, I think health hazard of human beings, health hazard of the snow and ice can be saved, and this also contribute to the climate change and other phenomena. So this way, by studying the black carbon, and we can understand how we can provide the mitigation. So this is in a nutshell I want to share over here, that if we can take care of the health of the Himalaya, Himalayan health is good means our health is good. And when our health is good, what more we want? We all wish everybody we should have a very happy, healthy life. So the healthy life is possible only when we will have our own environment healthy. So these are some of the steps we can take care. Thank you very much once again, Kulshrestha, for giving me an opportunity to share my thoughts, views with the people who are attending online. Once again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sain. If Himalaya is good, our health is good. With this message, I thank you very much for sparing your time out of your very busy schedule. Thank you. And your message is to use resources in a scientific manner and continuous monitoring our sensors so that human-induced extreme events can be avoided. Thank you very much. Now,
sorry, I will be leaving now.
thank you, and I seek your cooperation for future also in the various school events and programs.
Definitely, I will go through happy to do that.
Thank you.
So if you don't mind, I am just leaving.
Yeah, thank you very much. So now I invite our colleague and eminent panelist, Professor A.P. Dimri. Professor Dimri is very well-known meteorologist, hydrologist, Himalayan specialist, and he is running a number of projects on Himalaya, Ladakh, Leh. He is having, assessment of water bodies that related to hydrology of Himalaya. Professor Dimri has a lot of contributions in climate. He has very important papers. He is fellow of National Academy of Sciences and many other affiliations he has. He has very kindly agreed to be a panelist and share his thoughts. And let me tell you, Professor Dimri, as you can recognize, he belongs to Himalaya, so Himalaya Diwas is very relevant for him. Without now taking much of the time, I request Professor Dimri to say a few words and enlighten our students and other participants. Professor Dimri.
Thank you, Professor Kulshrestha, for nice words. Professor Rao and Professor Sain, my other colleagues and dear students. Himalaya is, as rightly set the tone by two of the august speakers. It's very important. If you are a Himalayan researcher, you will look at how beautiful massive is protruding out of the earth in the 6,000 to 8,000 meters. And I am going across a very beautiful book written by Professor late K.S. Wadia, which is Geography, People and Geomorphology in India in the Puranic and Epic time. It's a very good consolidation that how Himalaya came into existence. Of course, he was the known geologist, dynamic Himalaya. He wrote a very famous book. But how it has been connected to the Puranic and epic stories, as we also heard from our childhood that it's a abode of Hindu gods, and a lot of rivers comes in. So you can take it in the context of that context, how things have become. Coming back to the discourse of Himalaya Diwas, I congratulate organizers by me and Professor Kulshrestha. We have to think Himalaya as a kind of a dynamic system. If you are looking, of course, we cannot see by your eyes because this dynamical system is moving very slowly, but definitely moving here and there. And Professor Rao talked about the surface of the Himalaya because he talked of the agricultural livelihood. Professor Sain has talked about what happens within the Himalayan basin, and hence you have earthquakes, and it's gone beyond in the atmosphere. If I take the field up, Himalaya impacts up to very larger extent of the circulation, not only the Indian region, of course, it impacts largely, but it also impacts the large scale circulation, global circulation, because it is producing massive outside to stop the large scale circulation because of the rotation of Earth. The impact of the rotation of Earth also because that much of mass is kept at one place, and when Earth is rotating, you have a kind of a impact at slower rate. So Himalaya in a way can be a very beautiful natural laboratory which acts in the free atmosphere, which acts in the free land surface landform processes, which acts within the surface, what's happening in it. As rightly said that 55 billion years back, Himalaya came in origin, so it was a flat land when these two plates hit each other and the Himalayan plate went beneath and Himalaya started crumbling up, crumbling, protruding upside, and that's what brought millions of monsoon. This is the monsoon time. There are very many questions need to be answered, right from the small scale system as a disaster which happens in a couple of minutes, the large scale system which is impacting right through the intense summer monsoon, right through the winter monsoon, global warming, and which is having the snow over it, so you have a kind of water storage, methane is trapped in the form of permafrost. So there are various interconnected land fluxes exchange happening with the Himalayan surface and as well as within the Himalayan surface. Right? So today's talk I have ordered in such a way that I'll be keeping mostly on the climate interaction because two of my earlier August speakers have given a very good overview on how this is impacting on this. As far as when we are talking of the climate context and in the regional scale when we are coming down in this Himalayan context, how the Himalaya, if you are aware of the latest IPCC 2021 report which came few months back, it says that Himalayan context in particular is a data void region. There is a medium kind of a confidence on their finding, and the number of dry days have decreased in the lower elevation, and whereas in the upper elevation you have more warmer and dry days are increasing. Within the Himalayan surface, if you are trying to talk about that, in case of the wet or dry seasons, it means that there will be a change in pattern on the liquid water, or rather I would say liquid precipitation or solid precipitation, there will be exchanges in that. So you would likely to see in coming time there will be a less days with snow coming in the higher Himalayas. So most of the time you might probably see liquid precipitation. In the last 10 decade, 10 years, we find that by virtue of this increased temperature in the southern rim of the Himalaya, the southern side of the Himalaya, we found that there is increased number of potential disasters increasing. It can be named many. You have a cloudburst, it happened in increased number in the recent decade. You have landslides, it's plenty in numbers. You have floods, plenty in numbers, all the rivers if you look at that. But what interestingly new thing we found in the recent 2-3 years, that all these events it used to happen in isolation earlier by virtue of the energetics or by virtue of the distribution of energy in one way or other. In the recent years, we found that all these cascading events are happening together. Means one leading to start the another, another leading to start the other. Earlier understanding was that the cloudbursts when used to happen season, habitat used to wash off, and that's when we get to know that cloudburst has occurred. But in recent time, what's happening that because of the urban planning, the rivulets which used to fill because of this cloudburst flow, water flow or slurry, that's what is going down to the habitat because of this. If you read the book which I was referring by Wadia, that's what is the question he has raised somewhere while I'm going through why in our time in the Himalayan region, villages are not at the banks of river. Because I do remember my mom or my aunts, my elder ladies used to climb down to the river and pick up the water and then again used to go back to the village. So villages were not at the river banks, they were further, and it means that there were such a kind of understanding prevailing when any village is kind of made or established or situated itself. But that's another ramification is happening of the unknown, that lot of urbanization is populating along the smaller rivulets or maybe the river banks. So that's one of the important issues. And why this is important? Because due to the increased temperature in the lower valley or higher valley, you have seasonal meltwater from Himalayan glacier, as many of them, and then in that we found that in particular in the central Himalaya, or rather I would say central and western Himalayan region, there were double-fold increase in the flow of the rivers higher up in the Himalaya due to the increased
your connection is having some problem. You have 2 minutes, Professor Dimri.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Please take 2 minutes.
Okay. So that's what is integration of the river flow. That river flow is going to increase in 15 years time, but then in due course of time, this river flow will be decreasing because higher up in the Himalaya, we will not be having available lot of snow mass or the water mass available. Another important finding is the permafrost, which is the higher Himalaya. As of now, permafrost is kind of a debris buried with certain amount of water as in the methane. So the Himalaya is a very beautiful natural experiment, natural laboratory with multiple processes, with multiple kind of interactions happening within the Himalaya, within the kind of process changes in the time and this thing. So thank you very much, Professor Kulshrestha. I'm sorry I have taken a bit longer time. So
but it was required, you are talking from climate to hydrology to permafrost. So it is no problem because it's a bandit, there. So you have to take time to dig out it.
Like,
wonderful.
I have to Kulshrestha, I have another.
Okay. No, thank you. Thank you, please. Thank you so much for sparing your valuable time. Now I request our another colleague, Professor P.K. Joshi, to share his thoughts. And in fact, he started the discussion about celebration of Himalaya Diwas. Professor Joshi is a professor of ecology in our school. He is very dynamic. He is having a number of projects related to ecology, remote sensing, and Himalaya. Professor Joshi is very kind and very famous among students for his communication, research, behavior, and he is having one project, the SUNRAISE, that you might have seen in the poster logo of that project, and So this is co-sponsored or co-hosted by that project, and Professor Joshi is also co-host in a way, and as well as panelist. Professor Joshi, is smiling very nice. There is no need to go for his detailed biodata. Biodata is available. Now time is also coming to the end. Now I request Professor Joshi to take the screen. Professor Joshi, please.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Kulshrestha ji. Namaskar and good afternoon to all, and please accept my greetings and wishes on the Himalayan Day. As mentioned earlier, Himalaya Diwas is an initiative that was started somewhere in 2010 by a group of noted environmentalists and civil society members to spread the message that solution for sustainable development and ecological stability of Himalaya is must, and as this is very unique ecosystem in itself. Since then, many institutions of national repute, they started observing and celebrating this day. And lately, somewhere in 2014, the Chief Minister of Uttarakhand, he officially declared September 9 as Himalayan Diwas, a day to be celebrated to spread the message of conservation of Himalayan ecosystems. And later, what we understood that the central government also gave emphasis on this. So I must appreciate and congratulate Professor Kulshrestha ji to have it in SES JNU to observe and celebrate this day. Well, indeed, it was a pleasure listening to the previous speakers and their perspectives in their own unique way to express about the Himalayan system. So as we all know this, that entire globe is discussing ecological restoration. And if you all understand the importance of this, the United Nations has officially adopted the resolution declaring 2020-2030 as the UN decade of ecosystem restoration. Likewise, Convention on Biodiversity, which has always emphasized on ecosystem approach for variety of initiatives. Now, recently, the Sindhi framework, which is on, it talks about disaster risk reduction at the behest of ecosystem approach. Also, nature-based solutions is being talked very loudly, and in fact, in most of the countries, including ours, nature-based solutions have actually entered in all our decision making. So Himalaya is, one of such type of ecosystem which actually needs the perspective of ecosystem approach and also the baby steps of nature-based solution. So this Himalayan Day today in this year, the theme is chosen something aligning to these international initiatives, and the theme today is the Himalaya and the nature. So it is simply to align with the global initiatives, but for sure bringing acute local impacts. So when I have to talk about Himalaya, so to me this is a cultural and natural landscape which actually holds value in many aspects. So Himalaya have been a soul for the country by virtue of culture, ethnic groups, ecological, economic value, and also spiritual things. So one of the thing which very by default which comes to my mind, it holds the significance for Hindus as a god of Lord Shiva, but it is also known for spread of and practice of other religious groups like Jainism, Buddhism. So that way, for the subcontinent which we are deciding it becomes very important. But Himalaya is also a service provider. At least the three words major rivers you name, Indus, Ganges, Brahmaputra, they all arise from Himalaya. And if you try to look at the combined impact of the drainage basin of these rivers, they actually home somewhere 600 million people, and they are supporting more than 1 billion population in their actual day-to-day activities in terms of the livelihoods which are pertaining over there. So Himalaya is housing some unique kind of indigenous communities. Both it is rich in flora and fauna. It is diverse. It is having endemicity. So these all things are very much, integral part of this landscape, and which I see as a ecosystem service which is flowing from mountains to downstreams. At one point of time, people were talking very loudly on payment for ecosystem services, and therein Himalayan landscapes were ranked as the topmost in terms of providing ecosystem services. It has a unique contribution in terms of socio-ecological setup also. So one will be very nicely, if you walk through these mountains, right from your Shivaliks to Trans-Himalayas, one will be able to find a unique set of socio-ecological systems which were conceptually there, but which were also in practice and very much aligned with what we call today as sustainable development. So, if somebody tries to understand these, linkages between society and ecosystems, so one is able to see a very unique setting over there. Strategically, as many talked about, but it has been guarding countries' border from many fronts. Just not defense, also from cold waves. So what we see that by virtue of its geographical location, it is serving the entire downstream population, at least up to peninsular India, in terms of enriching soil, in terms of providing clear air, clear water. These all are by virtue of the ecosystem functions which are taking over there and the services which are resulting. However, if you try to see these Himalaya on the global map, these are often known or say debated for the origin of multiple hazards, which get very quickly converted into disasters. So these hazards are by virtue of its setting, by virtue of its emergence, by virtue of the dynamism which is there. But the disasters which are over there, it is purely because of human pressure, land use, the development activities, the challenges which this local environment brings in. And when you see the magnitude of impact of these disasters, this often spills off beyond regional to national scales. So if, after listening to all the three speakers, if I try summarizing Himalaya today, I feel it is still in its what we call adolescence stage. Geologically, it is the largest continuous landform over the Earth's surface, which is known to be the highest and also the youngest. So thus, it is still in the phases of its growth. So to me, it is this dynamics. It is more of a teenage turmoil, which comes as hazard or disaster, or at least it helps in understanding many of the processes and phenomena of development. In addition to these, there are multiple challenges which are already listed, right from as Professor Rao talked about food security, food systems over there. Dr. Sain mentioned about geological settings and many of the anthropocentric activities which are being very loudly being discussed in Himalayan landscapes. Likewise, Professor Dimri was more concentrating around meteorology and those kind of aspects. But if you see each of these things, it is very much anthropocentric. So these are actually for me creation of this Anthropocene. So when I look into these challenges, problems, so I recall one of the decisions way back in 2017, which came from High Court of Uttarakhand, So they actually ordered that the Ganges and its main tributary Yamuna, they should be treated or they should be accorded the status of living human entities. So I would like to argue or at least request everybody to think loudly, why not Himalaya? Himalaya should be looked at and should be dealt with a high degree of reverence or sensitivity for numerous reasons which other speakers have also mentioned. When I say these things, so I am not of the opinion of checking any kind of development activity which should be or which need to be done as a country. But why can't we promote or why can't we look solutions through the lenses of sustainable development pathways? That is the larger question which I would like to ask everybody. So unfortunately, to me, again, the importance of Himalaya was always, it was underestimated for its, the unique integral role which is there for the overall development of the nation and the way we stand today. And deterioration of these Himalayan systems due to inadequate attention is basically threatening the entire life-supporting resource system which is over there. You look into the status of forests, you look into the status of water, air, soil. These all have become, alarmingly very grim. So these need to be considered and managed through though for the national interest, but through the contribution of remaining subcontinent. And of course, from the transboundary cooperation, which is much needed. A huge chunk of that land comes within the conflict areas. So as an ecological challenge, the unique flora and faunal wealth of the Himalaya is undergoing both structural and compositional changes. It is due to human-induced fragmentation, whether you call it forest, you call it land holdings, also in terms of climate change. Though the increment of rate of changes there is incremental, but this increase in temperature is shifting many of the agriculture production which is there. It is affecting the timber line. Some of our own research, what we tried reporting that there is a early flowering and fruiting in some parts of the Himalayas with specific fruiting trees and also flowering trees, which add to livelihood. But many of the other species. Another very interesting thing which we have understood is both because of human activity and because by virtue of climate change, the invasive notorious species and specifically lantana and eupatorium, they have actually reached to higher reaches. Our ecological modeling exercises and also our footwork on mountains, it has actually reported us that such kind of variation is taking.
Professor Joshi, 1 minute please.
Okay, fine. So, for us, geologically it was always vulnerable, but probably people saw the first impacts of climate change by virtue of glaciers on mountains. Now there are variety of disasters, and I must say that most of these disasters are climate change induced. So, in a sense, the cumulative impact of these all kind of things is basically adding to vulnerability of local communities. So Himalaya is typically a very heterogeneous unit, though we often refer to as one unit and we treat it as a homogeneous one. Even our works at ground level tells us, even within watershed level, there is a acute heterogeneity in land use pattern, in communities, and many of the other aspects. So as a scientist, I see it as a wonderful laboratory having mosaics of multiple landscapes. And each entity helps, in fact, serves as a wonderful means of understanding many of the local and global phenomena, like climate change, human livelihood, ecological gradients. So having a sensitive reference to these attributes need to be in the forefront for any kind of anthropocentric intervention in the Himalayas. In fact, I would urge the people who are listening to me or otherwise, let us treat Himalaya as Himalaya. Let us not try to make it like any other landscape of this earth. which is at times which is coming in the language of development, in the language of changes which are. So it is a fragile, it is a cascading landscape which is having much wider and effects which are actually beyond imagination of human beings or humanity. So let us look at on this Himalayan Diwas, we re-look into various aspects of addressing challenges and issues of Himalayas as a scientist, so that our policymakers and politicians can actually give a difference to that. So I will stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Joshi, for your wonderful, insight about Himalaya, and Himalaya. Let the Himalaya remain Himalaya. It's what you told, it's a heterogeneous system. Construction leading to high altitude.
On road ecology, and till date, when road ecology is talked globally, so it is always road service.
Road on the forests. So these all kind of things are there. But regeneration capability, herbaceous population, that is something which is acutely getting affected. And these are all evidences which have come from Shivalik mountains, which is also resulting into so that is making these mountain systems much more unstable. Small scale landslides are becoming much more frequent. So that is one of the attributes which could be linked to the road constructions.
There is another question. In Uttarakhand, we are making 6 hydroelectric projects, and what kind of effect they are going to have in Uttarakhand? Because a lot of country there. Professor Rao or Joshi, anybody you can answer please. हाइड्रोइलेक्ट्रिक प्रोजेक्ट का उत्तराखंड में क्या असर होगा? Professor Joshi?
Okay, so these all are run-of-river hydro projects which are over there. So they are not actually advisable. What ecologists and people who have looked into the ground, they have always suggested small size projects which can look into the natural downward flow of rivers, micro turbines, Herald. So these kind of things are which are suitable for these mountain ecosystems, not the large ones. So somewhere we need to find out a balance between what we are aspiring for.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Now we have our young speaker, YoHo leader, Komal choudhary. Young Holistic Program, as I told you, it's a part of our co-curricular activity under holistic environment. And the students are, conducting various competitions, debate, poster making, or recipe, different type of contests. Environment, Himalaya, and YoHo program. Komal, please.
Thank you so much, sir. Am I audible?
Yeah.
A very good afternoon to respected all, and a very big thanks to our dean for providing me with such an opportunity. And I'm very happy to see Joshi sir here and Dimri sir, and to hear them again as they taught us. So thank you so much for being here, sir. And I'm also very much interested in water management, water quality management basically. And as Himalayas being the major source of water for the rivers or Himalayan rivers are also Himalayan rivers which are a lifeline for the Indo-Gangetic rivers and home to several million people. So it's overall a great insight, and it was a great honor to hear about the sensitivity of the Himalayas from Dr. Sain and about the agro-diversity and its conservation of Himalayan region and major issues related to it and the changing scenario, the action plan for Himalayan required because of its tectonic and seismic activities, and also talked about different initiatives taken by different organizations. So thank you so much, Professor Rao. So I think a lot of things have been already said. So I would like to wish everybody a very happy Himalayan Day. The Himalaya Day is an initiative that was taken by Uttarakhand government and was started in 2010, which was actually initiated in 2014. So, and it was initiated by a group of noted environmentalists and activists, including late Sri Sundarlal Bahuguna ji, Anil Joshi, Radha Dahan, and all. So today we all are there to commit ourselves to the cause of sustainable development in the Himalayan region. And I am here as a YoHo lead, and under the Holistic Environment Program, we endeavor to celebrate this occasion to know more and more about the fragile ecosystem. So the Himalaya, which has a great significance, as we got to know more about it now today from our respected guests. So, and as it's a responsibility to do all the required and possible activities to sustain these kind of fragile ecosystems, so as YoHo team, by working in groups and frequently organizing various activities and competitions that pertain to holistic environment, and it helps us to reach out to participants from all over the world, or basically the school students, the undergraduate and the research students, and also eminent experts like our guests in the field who take out time environmental issues. I think these activities have helped us a great deal in capacity building and sensitizing people, and YoHo is one such great platform. And so I would like to conclude my talk with a very beautiful quote by Stephen Elder, who said biodiversity is the great mountain range in the world, and in India, our country, India is awarded with such great Himalaya ecosystem, which provide us with a wide range of ecosystem with wide range of biodiversity. So there is a need to know about the science behind it. So that's all about it. And as a YoHo young holistic leader, YoHo, which is and it was a wonderful talk about that lead to each renowned professor. I'm grateful to be a part of this event, and this event by YoHo, where youngsters are provided with such great platform to develop their leadership skills. So I would like to thank Professor Umesh. Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah. So now we are close to end. I thank all. I now request Swati Singh, Program Officer, ENVIS, to propose a formal vote of thanks. I was seeing Usha Meena, she was there, she is coordinator of ENVIS, she is not now. So Swati, please propose vote of thanks.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. First of all, I would like to wish everyone a very happy Himalaya Diwas. And for me, I would treat Himalaya as a crown, which is embedded with lot of jewels, lot of natural resources there. And now it is sustainable development responsibility of the entire country taking care of this jewel on our head. So with this, I would now formally thank Professor K.S. Rao sir, Dr. K.C. Sain sir, Professor A.P. Dimri, Professor Joshi sir, for sparing their valuable time and sharing with us all the perspectives, right from cultural, ecological, geological. So I think we've got the opportunity to hear all the aspects that are important for the Himalaya. And I would like to thank from bottom of my heart to my coordinator, for giving us this opportunity to celebrate this important day. And thank you, sir. And I would like to thank all the participants for your sparing your time and peaceful hearing. And all the YoHo students, thank you for sharing. Very nice and encouraging how students are taking these. And last but not the least, my colleagues, this for the support. Thank you, everybody. Very nice time.
Thank you all. And Himalaya is important for us, for our survival, for our existence. Take this message and do research about that and share your thoughts. These meetings will be continued world over. And you are, all students, you are torch bearer for future. So please take seriously, because these are the alarms that Himalaya is under threat. So you have to work your research, as the speakers mentioned, that we have to do all resources exploration scientifically. So that is now lesson for you. Go and perform science, be scientific. Thank you very much. Thank you all. Rao Saab, Sain Saab.
Thank you very much.
Dimri, Professor Joshi. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
बहुत अच्छा रहा. Thank you for report. You share report. You share report.
It was good. It was good. Diverse topics, diverse opinion, but for Himalayas.
पर उस समय